Picture this. It is just after 11 p.m. on June 25th, 2024.
Okay.
You are driving down this pitch black, totally desolate stretch of Highway 70 in Otto County, New Mexico. I mean, there are absolutely no streetlights out here.
Right, just total darkness.
Exactly. It's just a sea of ink right beyond the reach of your headlights with just that quiet hum of your tires on the asphalt.
Yeah, that isolation can be really unsettling.
It really is. So as you're passing mile marker 241, your high beams sweep across the shoulder, and you see a lone figure walking in the darkness.
Out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's a young guy. And he's not running, he's not stumbling or anything, he is just walking. But, it's late, it is dangerously dark, and the isolation of that highway just makes you uneasy.
Right, your instinct is just to make sure they're safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You pick up your phone and you call in a welfare check because you think, hey, I'm getting this kid a ride home, or maybe just making sure he doesn't wander into traffic.
Which is how it should work,
Yeah.
The intention is protection. A welfare check is structurally designed in law enforcement protocols to be a low-stress, service-oriented response.
Right.
The primary objective is the preservation of life, not criminal apprehension.
But the reality of what happened next, which is documented in literally hundreds of pages of case files, dashcam transcripts, and court dockets, reveals that this single phone call triggered a chaotic, lethal escalation.
It really did.
So our mission for this deep dive is to examine the raw facts surrounding an encounter that morphed from a citizen's concern into a first-degree murder charge against a police officer.
And before we parse the timeline, we really need to establish our baseline for this deep dive.
Definitely.
We're looking at these case files, the dashcam transcripts, and the official court records with strict impartiality. The objective is to understand the mechanics of the event. We're going to explore the overwhelming community outcry that followed, and we will equally examine the deputy's stated defense, right? Analyzing the use of force continuum from both a legal and tactical perspective.
Without taking sides.
Exactly. We are not taking sides. We are just mapping the raw data to understand how the system operated that night.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's go back to the highway. According to the time-stamped dispatch logs in the dashcam transcripts we have, the Otto County deputy assigned to this call is not treating it as a high-threat environment.
No, not at all.
There are no sirens, no speeding. The telemetry data shows the cruiser moving at the super casual 55 miles per hour.
Which is pretty standard.
Right. But inside the cabin, the deputy is blasting the club song In Da Ghetto by J Balvin and Skrillex at maximum volume. I mean, the environment in the car is completely relaxed.
Yeah, and that telemetry and audio data actually perfectly aligns with the dispatch code.
Oh, really?
Yeah, pedestrian welfare check doesn't legally authorize a Code 3 emergency response.
Yeah.
Lights and sirens, because there is no known active threat.
That makes sense. So as the deputy approaches mile marker 241, his headlights catch the figure. He slows the cruiser down. Now, the pedestrian is 17-year-old Elijah Hadley. He's a Mescalero Apache teenager.
Right.
And given the relaxed atmosphere inside the patrol car, standard community policing protocols would suggest a conversational approach, like a simple, hey man, you need a ride.
Exactly, just a casual check-in.
But the moment the cruiser's tires stop, the dashcam audio registers an immediate explosive escalation. I mean, the deputy just yells out, stop right there, bro, stop right there. What are you doing? Let me see your other hand, bro. Let me see your other hand, dog.
It's just so sudden. The auditory shift is violent.
Yeah.
The transcript shows an instantaneous leap from casual driving to just aggressive, tactical verbal commands. It essentially skips several steps in standard de-escalation models.
It really does. So Elijah has a shirt draped over his arm, right? And he pulls his hand out from beneath it. According to the scene reports and the forensic mapping, he is holding what appears to be a gun.
Which obviously changes the dynamic.
It does. But the chronological sequence in the case file is paramount here. The very moment the weapon clears the shirt, Elijah throws it completely away from his body.
Just tosses it.
Tossing it deep into the grassy median. And in that exact fraction of a second, the deputy fires 4 shots.
Wow.
Elijah goes down immediately, crying out in pain. The deputy screams again to see his hands, and the transcripts detail Elijah raising one hand into the air. It is covered in blood. It's literally the only hand he can physically move.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of police threat assessment. It is supposed to function like a circuit breaker.
A circuit breaker?
Yeah. The moment an active threat is neutralized or grounded, the circuit breaks, right? And the application of lethal force is supposed to stop.
Okay, I see.
At the exact second Elijah raises that bloody hand, the immediate threat, the weapon, which, by the way, was later identified as a BB gun, is physically disconnected from the suspect.
Right, it's in the grass.
Exactly. The suspect is on the ground, incapacitated, and actively complying with the verbal command to show his hands. The circuit should have broken.
I mean, I have to push back on that framework, though.
Okay, go ahead.
We are analyzing this from a quiet room, but out there on Highway 70, it is pitch black.
Very true.
If a deputy sees a weapon, fires, and the suspect drops, doesn't current qualified immunity case law heavily favor the officer's split-second perception of the threat, even if we know in hindsight the weapon was in the grass?
Well, yes. The Supreme Court case, Graham v. Connor, absolutely establishes that use of force must be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene.
Right.
It acknowledges that police make split-second judgments in tense, uncertain circumstances. So the initial 4 shots, legally speaking, fall heavily into that protective gray area.
Because he saw a silhouette.
Exactly. An officer sees a gun silhouette in the dark, and the law generally provides wide latitude for that initial reaction.
But the incident reports detail what happens next, and that is where the gray area just completely vanishes.
Yeah, the timeline shifts.
After those first 4 shots, the deputy doesn't move forward to secure the suspect. He doesn't kick the weapon further away or render immediate aid.
No.
He retreats to the rear of his cruiser. He pulls out a first aid kit, takes cover behind his open driver's side door, and gets on the radio.
He's buying time.
Yeah, he calls for backup, stating he has a subject down, but then explicitly tells dispatch he doesn't know where the gun is, or if the subject could still pick it up.
And meanwhile, the audio logs indicate Elijah is lying on the asphalt, severely wounded, and just rolling in agony.
It's horrific. While Elijah is rolling on the ground, the dashcam audio picks up the deputy yelling, "Don't go to that gun."
And
then he unleashes a second massive barrage of gunfire.
oh my.
Yeah. Before any backup units arrive, the 17-year-old is dead on the highway. When the medical examiner's autopsy report was finalized, it revealed the absolute devastation of that second volley.
The extent of the damage.
Elijah wasn't just struck by those initial rounds. He absorbed a minimum of 15 bullets.
A minimum of 15. The sheer volume of gunfire fundamentally shifts the legal calculus here.
How so?
There's a concept used in military and police training called the ODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act.
Okay, I've heard of that.
An officer must constantly cycle through this loop. Between the first volley and the second volley, the deputy had time to retreat, retrieve a medical kit, use the radio, and issue new commands.
Right, that's a lot of actions.
Exactly. That is plenty of time for the ODA loop to reset. The split-second judgment defense becomes incredibly fragile when actual minutes separate the trigger pulls.
Which makes the initial response from law enforcement all the more baffling. When an event like this occurs, the public's first understanding is shaped entirely by official press releases. 2 days after the shooting, the New Mexico State Police issued their statement. They confirmed the deceased was 17-year-old Elijah Hadley, and they confirmed the weapon recovered was a BB gun.
Okay.
But when detailing the lethal force used, the official document stated, quote, "The deputy fired at least 1 round from his duty weapon striking Hadley."
At least 1 round.
Yeah.
That phrasing is a deliberate mechanism of bureaucratic narrative control.
It has to be.
By framing 15-plus ballistic impacts as at least 1 round, the agency is technically avoiding perjury while actively suppressing the narrative temperature.
I found myself just staring at that sentence in the file. Like, how does a public information officer justify calling 15 bullet wounds at least 1 round?
It's wild.
It feels like a massive omission of the reality on that highway.
Public relations units and law enforcement agencies utilize these sterile placeholders to manage public shock before the raw transcripts and autopsy reports become public record. If they release a statement saying a deputy shot a teenager 15 times on a dark highway over a BB gun, the immediate public reaction is uncontrollable. At least 1 round buys the agency time.
Well, it didn't last. When media requests finally forced the release of the actual incident logs and dashcam transcripts weeks later, the community exploded.
I can imagine.
The outrage was visceral. But to fully grasp the tragedy embedded in these files, we really need to look at the BIA records and community background files to understand who Elijah Hadley actually was.
Because a name on a casualty report strips away all human context, which is absolutely vital for understanding the sequence of events that put him on that road in the first place.
Exactly. So Elijah lived on the nearby Mescalero Apache reservation.
Okay.
Background files show he came from a massive, incredibly hardworking family, 5 siblings, all juggling jobs, military service, and financial struggles. And the timeline is just devastating. The very next day was his little brother's birthday.
Oh, wow. And the prevailing question investigators focused on was the presence of the weapon, right?
Yeah, like why did he have it?
Exactly. Why is a 17-year-old walking down an unlit highway holding a BB gun?
Well, the Bureau of Indian Affairs police records actually solve that mystery, and it paints a highly specific picture of his mindset. We have DIA case files showing that exactly 24 hours before this fatal encounter, Elijah was the victim of a violent battery.
He was attacked.
Yes. The investigative file includes photos taken of him with his face severely cut and bruised.
See, from a behavioral analysis standpoint, that data point changes everything.
It really does.
You have a teenager who was physically traumatized just a day prior. He is walking alone in the pitch black in an isolated area. The BB gun was not an offensive weapon meant for a robbery or an assault.
No, not at all.
It was defensive posturing, a visual bluff. He carried it to ensure he wouldn't look like an easy target for a secondary assault.
That is so sad. And the geography of that night adds this whole other layer of systemic tragedy that is just hard to stomach.
The location.
Yeah. Case notes trace his path. He was dropped off by friends at a church about 2.5 miles away from his mom's house, and he was simply walking the remaining distance home.
Okay.
When Elijah was stopped by the deputy at mile marker 241, the GPS coordinates show he was less than half a mile from the reservation line.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the jurisdictional mechanics of this area turn a half mile into a literal matter of life and death.
Right.
Because of complex laws governing tribal sovereignty, county sheriffs often do not have jurisdiction on reservation land unless there is a very specific cross-deputization agreement.
Yeah, I dug into the dispatch protocols for Otto County. If Elijah had walked just another 800 yards and crossed that invisible boundary line, the 911 dispatcher would have been required to route that welfare check entirely differently.
It wouldn't have gone to that deputy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It likely would have gone to tribal police officers who operate with a completely different community context. The Otto County deputy wouldn't have even been authorized to initiate the stop.
It is an absolute tragedy of geography.
Now, diving through the juvenile records, some early reports noted Elijah had previously worn an ankle monitor during a period in high school.
Okay, so a bit of a history.
But when you look at the testimony from people who interacted with him daily, a completely different profile emerges.
Like who?
Well, his high school teacher, Kelly Smith, submitted statements describing him as an old soul. She detailed how he was deeply respectful, obedient, and had actually recently won a major art competition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She explicitly noted in her affidavit that he was someone who never talked back and never fought back. When she read the initial police reports claiming he had aggressively disobeyed an officer, she stated categorically, quote, "That's not Elijah."
The dissonance between the tactical reports filed by the deputy and the character affidavits from the community created a friction that the internal investigation just failed to resolve.
Because for months, the administrative wheels barely turned. The deputy was placed on standard paid administrative leave pending an internal review.
Which is standard protocol.
It is. But then, internal memos from September of 2024 showed he was quietly cleared to return to full duty.
Wait, really?
Full pay, full police work, back in a cruiser.
And that reinstatement acted as an accelerant. For the family and the surrounding community, it signaled a complete system failure and a total lack of institutional accountability.
Definitely. This perceived failure mobilized citizens who had absolutely no prior connection to Elijah.
People just from the community.
Yeah, the court records highlight 2 advocates, Kristen Bress and Danielle Ta. They were strangers living in the county who read the unredacted reports and became full-time fixtures of protest.
Oh.
For 6 continuous weeks, from sunup to sundown, they occupied the space outside the sheriff's office, demanding the deputy be named, investigated transparently, and charged.
Their mobilization really demonstrates how raw data, once it's liberated from that bureaucratic phrasing, can drive civic action.
Absolutely.
They provided the logistical endurance that a grieving, traumatized family often just cannot sustain against a municipal bureaucracy.
And their persistence forced the system's hand. In January 2025, the Brunner County District Attorney's Office formally submitted charges against Deputy Jacob Diaz-Austin.
Okay.
And they bypassed manslaughter entirely. The docket shows a charge of first-degree murder.
Which is huge. Securing a first-degree murder charge in an officer-involved shooting is exceptionally difficult.
Because of the intent required?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The statutory mechanics of first-degree murder require the prosecution to prove premeditation or a level of deliberate, conscious intent to kill that goes far beyond just a negligent tactical error or a panicked mistake.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
With the formal charges filed, the underlying investigation files were entered into the public record. This included the raw transcripts of Deputy Diaz-Austin's interrogation, which was conducted by detectives just 5 days after the shooting.
Wow, 5 days.
Yeah. This document provided the first unfiltered look at his operational narrative.
And an interrogation of a police officer by a fellow detective is a highly nuanced environment. How did he articulate the mechanics of his decision to fire that second volley?
Well, the transcripts show the deputy claimed that during the initial stop, Elijah reached across his waistband. As we discussed in those initial seconds in the dark, the law affords the deputy the presumption of a perceived lethal threat.
Right, the Graham v. Connor standard.
But the interrogation focused heavily on the second barrage. The deputy told detectives that while Elijah was rolling on the ground, he saw Elijah's shoulder pop up, which led him to believe the gun was still securely in the teenager's hand.
But analyzing the structure of the interrogation, the interviewing detective doesn't just accept that statement.
No, he pushes back.
He uses a funnel questioning technique, systematically locking down the spatial dimensions of the scene before challenging the deputy's perception.
Yeah, the transcript reads like a tense courtroom cross-examination. Yeah. The detective methodically asks, "Did you at any point see the firearm in his hands?" The deputy answers, "No, sir, it was on the left side of his body."
Okay, establishing the location.
Right. Then the detective tightens the funnel. He says, "So it was on the ground." The deputy, who's now kind of boxed into his own timeline, is forced to admit, "Yes, sir."
Wow.
The detective makes him confirm this reality for the duration of the shots fired while Elijah was down. He gets the deputy on the record stating that the gun was on the pavement, completely out of Elijah's control, when the fatal 15-round barrage was unleashed.
That admission right there is the structural foundation of the prosecution's first-degree murder case.
It has to be.
The deputy acknowledged firing upon an incapacitated subject when the weapon was visibly disconnected.
But community sleuths auditing public court databases unearthed a massive variable.
What did they find?
They found a civil lawsuit filed in 2020, a full year before Jacob Diaz-Austin entered the police academy. The civil filings show that Diaz-Austin was teaching a concealed carry course at a local shooting range. During a drill, he was struck in the face by an unidentified object. The medical documentation attached to the lawsuit explicitly states the impact caused severe and permanent damage to his right eye.
Wow. That introduces a profound physiological element to the tactical analysis.
I mean, it's like finding a cracked lens inside a camera you thought was just taking blurry photos.
Right.
It forces you to completely reevaluate the entire incident report. Like, did he fire 15 shots into a teenager because his permanent severe vision impairment destroyed his depth perception in the dark, making him genuinely believe the BB done in the grass was still in Elijah's hand? Or does this lawsuit point to severe unresolved trauma from a previous firearms drill that caused him to enter a state of complete physiological panic?
Impartially speaking, this document will be heavily weaponized by both sides in court.
Oh, for sure.
The defense will likely use it to argue a tragic physiological misperception of distance in a low-light environment, basically bolstering the Graham v. Connor defense of a reasonable, albeit flawed, split-second judgment.
And the prosecution?
Conversely, the prosecution will frame it as proof that he was fundamentally unfit for duty, and that choosing to patrol a dark highway with severe visual impairments constitutes a reckless disregard for human life.
Which drove me straight to his personnel files. I mean, how does a candidate with court-documented severe permanent eye damage pass the Academy's mandatory vision tests?
That is the million-dollar question.
The certifications in his file show he passed the medical clearances without issue.
Unbelievable.
It exposes a terrifying layer of systemic failure before he ever even put on the badge.
And those systemic anomalies don't terminate at his hiring process. They extend directly into how the judicial system is currently processing him as a murder defendant.
Yeah, the current legal reality documented in the court rosters is absolutely baffling. Deputy Diaz-Austin is officially indicted for first-degree murder. Yet, a check of the county jail system shows he is not in custody. He didn't post a multi-million-dollar bond. He's not subjected to GPS ankle monitoring.
None of it.
None of it. The docket shows he waived his formal arraignment, effectively entering a not guilty plea, and then the specific conditions of his release simply vanished from the public portal.
The presiding judge sealed the release conditions, which is highly, highly unusual for a high-profile homicide docket.
Yeah, advocates spent weeks navigating the bureaucratic maze, filing motions just to understand why a first-degree murder suspect was sleeping in his own bed.
Right.
When they finally forced the court to unseal the release documents, they revealed the judge had granted him release on personal recognizance.
This raises an important question about the fundamental equities and risk assessment algorithms of our legal system.
Yeah, how does that even happen?
Personal recognizance, or a PR bond, means the court releases a defendant based solely on their signed promise to appear for trial. It requires zero financial collateral.
Just a promise.
Structurally, judges utilize PR bonds almost exclusively for non-violent misdemeanors or minor infractions, where the defendant is deemed neither a flight risk nor a danger to the community.
Yeah, I looked at the bail matrix for New Mexico. If a civilian with a PR bond history is charged with first-degree murder, they are almost universally held without bail or given a bond so astronomically high they can't possibly post it.
Exactly.
The presumption is that someone facing life in prison is an inherent flight risk.
Which is exactly the point the community is making. To grant personal recognizance to a defendant facing the most severe homicide charge on the books is an astonishingly rare legal anomaly.
It's unheard of.
It suggests the judicial risk assessment inherently views law enforcement officers as possessing a different class of citizenship, completely insulated from the standard mechanisms of pretrial detention.
It is truly staggering when you assemble all the pieces from these files. So what does this all mean?
That's the question.
We have a massive trial looming. A courtroom where the undeniable time-stamped reality of the dashcam audio and the interrogation transcripts are going to violently collide with the deputy's defense of fear, darkness, and physical limitation.
Yes.
A jury of citizens will have to sift through this raw data and decide if the events at mile marker 241 constituted a tragic sequence of errors fueled by bad eyesight or the deliberate, unjustified execution of a teenager who had already thrown his weapon away.
As we monitor the dockets for that trial, there is a fundamental concept to explore on your own. Modern law enforcement training meticulously drills officers on the mechanics of identifying and neutralizing a threat. The tactical manuals are thick with protocols for escalation.
Right.
But the case files of Elijah Hadley demand we ask, how are we training them to recognize when a threat has ended?
That's a great point.
When the boundary between a routine, service-oriented welfare check and a first-degree murder charge is decided in the span of a few panicked seconds on an unlit highway, who is truly failing? Is it the terrified individual walking on the shoulder, the officer pulling the trigger in the dark, or the broader institutional system that put them both on an inevitable collision course?
It's a question that haunts every page of this case file, and it is one we really can't stop asking. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep reading the files, keep examining the evidence, and always keep questioning the narrative. We will catch you on the next one.